Well, a very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first of our Cunard Insights lecture programmes. Lovely to see you here this morning, and I hope you're all settled in and already enjoying yourselves on Queen Elizabeth. Now, our first speaker this morning is a scientist, a television personality, and an author. He has appeared on programmes like Newsnight and Question Time, and featured in television series called Secret Weapons and Unsolved Mysteries. And he's also a visiting professor lecturing at universities. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Brian Ford.
Well, good morning, everybody. And how nice of you to be here. Any right-thinking person would be sipping coffee and nibbling scrambled egg at this time of day. I'm always asked by people, got any tips for a frequent cruiser? So I'll give you a couple, and here's one for today. When you go to the elevator, to the lift, it goes ding dong, but it only does that if the lift is going down. When it's going up, it goes just ding. Most people never notice that. And the purpose of my telling you this is because when you stand in one of the stairwells where the elevators are, and one goes ping, you're craning your neck around thinking, which one is it? Is it going up? Is it going down? You feel as though you're in the middle of a computer game. And you really got to put your neck out doing that. So remember in future that it goes ding dong when it's going down, and ding when it's going up. So you and your spouse can stand there, and the lift will go ding, and you can say, no, we need one that's going up. And everybody who didn't come to this lecture will think, how did they know? Now, the secret story of Christmas. We celebrate Christmas in a Christian culture as the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. Except for two things. One is that we all know that he wasn't born in the middle of December. And the other is that people had been celebrating at this time of year for an awfully long time before that. And there are other celebrations in the winter months which people often link with Christmas. And here's one example. Hanukkah is often thought to be a Jewish version of Christmas, but it's not. It celebrates the rededication of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And the date varies. It can be in December, it can also be in November. Then you have Diwali, the festival of lamps in India. And that too is a sort of a midwinter celebration, but it marks the darkest night, not of winter, but the darkest night of autumn. And that also has thousands of years of history behind it. Then you have Muharram, in the Islamic calendar, which in fact marks, they mourn Hussein ibn Ali, who was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. By the way, I don't understand, forgive me, why there is so much animosity between the Christian and the Islamic world. And I'll tell you why. You all know that when Muslims mention the name of the Prophet, they always say, peace be upon him. Yes. But what you don't know is that they also greatly value Jesus too. And when Muslims mention the name of Jesus, they also say, peace be upon him. And if you read the Quran, you'll be astonished to see the number of times that the Prophet Muhammad tells people to heed the words of Jesus and to follow his commands. Muhammad was a great believer that Jesus was an enormous prophet. And of course, Muslims value Muhammad more than Jesus because he came later. But Muhammad was a supporter of Jesus and his teachings. And I really cannot understand why it has become the case for us to imagine that Muslims and Christians are sort of poles apart. They're cousin religions, and most of their beliefs are really very, very similar. Then, of course, you have the ancient Persian celebration of Shab al-Yalda, which actually was also a celebration in a nighttime celebration in the middle of winter. And more recently, of course, we've had St. Lucia, as in lucid, the patron saint of light, and that is celebrated throughout Scandinavia, they don't celebrate Christmas in the way that we do, but they eat saffron cake because it's yellow, the colour of gold, the colour of the sun. And they have processions and all that kind of stuff. It's also celebrated in Malta and in Hungary. And in Britain some years ago, we had this appalling invention of what the Birmingham Authority called winter rest. Winter ball, I think it's called. And that was celebrated in 1997 and in 1999 in Birmingham, because, bless their silly little narrow-minded hearts, they thought, well, we won't call it Christmas, we'll call it Winterval, and we won't flog the Christian thing too much in case other religions don't like it. I've often said to people out there, just suppose that we all got together and we thought, let's go to India and celebrate Diwali. And when we got there, they hadn't got it because they said, well, we wouldn't like to have it in case we offended the Christians. I mean, you go to celebrate these things. And most of the joyous Christmas cards that we get are sent by friends of ours who are Jews. And the most happy rendition that I saw of Silent Night was sung by an Islamic choir. I mean, it just isn't true that people are offended by the celebration of Christmas. And of course, Christmas does have a really special relationship with many ancient cultures. The sun god was being worshipped in the middle of winter 2,500 years ago. And in Rome, you had Saturnalia, the worship of Saturn. This was to mark the middle of winter, the dark days of winter. And on the 22nd of December, which is quite close to our Christmas, you had Sigillaria, the feast of the dolls. There are many ancient celebrations, but in fact they go back not just for tens, but probably for hundreds of thousands of years, because what we're all celebrating in our modern way is the interminably ancient phenomenon of the winter solstice. On about the 21st of December, sometimes it's in the late hours of the 20th, in the middle of winter, the 21st of December, is when the Earth is furthest tilted away from the sun. And that is the angle at which the Earth is poised on the 21st of December. I always find Christmas is exceedingly reassuring because by now the nights are already drawing out. Today is going to be just a teeny little bit longer than yesterday. And yesterday was a smidge longer than the day before. The shortest day was the 21st. And so every time you get to Christmas, I think, well, already the days are getting longer, ready for next year. And that is what they celebrated all those tens of thousands of years ago. When the Earth is at the other end of its orbit, it's about just under 93 million miles away from the sun. When it's the other end of its orbit, then of course we're tilting towards the sun in the northern hemisphere, and so that's why the sun appears so high in the sky. The 21st of June, as we all know, is the longest day. But winter has a lot of very magical and intimidating things about it. I love this photograph taken. Ice crystals high in the sky, and that was taken in Scandinavia at Christmas, and it's almost as though there's a kind of a celestial cross hovering in the sky just at this most magical time of the year. Well, Christmas itself was never suggested at the time of Christ. It was Pope Julius I who actually invented the notion of celebrating Christmas. And that was in the 4th century. And why do we celebrate it on this particular day? Well, it was St. Augustine who said that we should celebrate the birth of our Lord in the middle of winter, because Jesus would represent the coming of new light in the world, and this was about the time of the darkest nights. And so therefore it was highly symbolic, and that's when it should be celebrated. But other people celebrate other things. Firstly, they celebrate the feast of St. Stephen on the feast of Stephen, which is actually on our Boxing Day. And of course, because some of the churches never changed to the Gregorian calendar, the other churches have their dates very often rather later than ours. So the Armenian Church don't celebrate until the 6th of January, and then we have the Eastern Orthodox on the 7th, and the Armenians on the 19th of January. But St. Stephen's Day is still widely celebrated. And the curious thing is that Christmas is a pagan festival, way, way, way pre-Christian. And of course, the reason that it was held is because those early philosophers realized, it must have been terrifying when you began to notice that the nights were suddenly getting longer. It must have seemed like the end of the world until you worked out what was happening. And by the time, probably 50 or 100,000 years ago, by the time our primitive Stone Age antecedents had worked out that it actually got darker and darker, then got lighter and lighter. And they began to sort of calculate roughly when in the year that was. And that is why they brought inside greenery, evergreen plants, like laurel and ivy and holly. That is why they started lighting candles in order to remind them of the light of summer that was yet to come. And I find it astonishing that so few of us stop to realise that we're actually carrying out Stone Age traditions when we decorate our homes. Because although Roman Catholics will quite often set out a little crib made of plastic or plaster models of the Holy Couple and the baby Jesus in the manger, but other religions don't. We hang up garlands, we hang up lights, we hang up greenery, and everything we're doing dates back probably at least 50 or 100,000 years. It's nothing to do with any religious iconography. What we're doing is celebrating as the pagans did, by having symbols of life in our house and symbols of light in the darkness. If you do go and look at a crib, and you will find people, lovely little representations like this, and wherever you go, curious thing, people always make Joseph and Mary to look like them. Now, whatever these people look like, they did not look like this. This is a beautiful, almost film star-like Virgin Mary. But of course, she wasn't a European. Here is Joseph, as he is very frequently portrayed in the crib that you will see in a church. It's much more likely, of course, that Joseph looked like Yasser Arafat, but without the sex appeal. Whatever he looked like, he didn't look like this. And what about the Christmas tree? Now, Caroline in the next lecture is going to go into details about the Victorian Christmas, and of course it's der Tannenbaum, the tree of Christmas from Germany that we all associate with Christmas now. But bringing a tree, having a tree in your house, having leaves in your house to celebrate, dates back for tens of thousands of years. You find records of it in ancient Egypt, you find records of it in ancient China. The first record of a tree in England is in the literature in the year 1605. It dates back much, much further than you might think. We always associate it with Prince Albert in the middle 1800s. But in fact, Princess Charlotte had yew brought in and decorated with candles in the late 1700s. And other people were doing things like it many, many years before that. For example, in the west of England, we have the great ashen faggot. It is not the senior maitre d' on his night off, as you might call it. But the great ashen faggot was always a bunch of aromatic branches that were burnt on Christmas Eve. And of course you have the Yule log. And Yule, as you know, Yule is the Scandinavian form of Christmas. Yule is very widely celebrated around Europe. And that's what's so interesting. So many of these traditions are based not on any Christian belief, but on very, very ancient ceremonies that go back a long time. When Christianity spread, it tended to adopt pre-existing celebrations and make them into Christian ones. So the winter solstice was made into Christmas. The vernal equinox, the 21st of March, when day and night are exactly equal everywhere in the world, that became adopted by Easter. In the summer, what had been celebrated as the longest day was adopted as Whitsunday. And the autumnal equinox became the harvest festival. So in each case, when we celebrate these now Christian festivals, we're actually linking back to things that were known to the ancients tens of thousands of years ago. And German paganism celebrated green leaves like the yew brought indoors. Interestingly, in the Netherlands, for example, it's only recently that they started celebrating Christmas as we do. They always used to celebrate, but not particularly emphasising Christmas. In Scotland, Hogmanay is a great celebration, and Christmas is not so very well celebrated. It really is quite remarkable. And Britain is the one country in the world that starts marking Christmas before anybody else. When I was a little boy, which admittedly is many months ago, we used to put up the Christmas tree usually about the 21st to 23rd of December. When I was very small, Christmas trees were always put up on Christmas Eve. Now they seem to go up almost as soon as the Easter eggs have come out. And not only that, but we in our house, we celebrate the 12 days of Christmas. We don't take the stuff down till the 5th of January. But our younger neighbours, younger generation, the younger neighbours, they tend to put up all their decorations at the end of November. At the moment Boxing Day is over, they all come down again. The whole season has shifted forwards in our lifetimes, which I find really quite disturbing. And what about these plants that we bring indoors to celebrate? Well, of course, mistletoe. Kissing under the mistletoe. Mistletoe was a very special plant to the ancients, because it was the only green plant they knew that didn't grow in the ground. Every plant had its roots in the earth, but Viscon album, the mistletoe, always lived on other plants. And there's a whole range of plants it will live on. It lives on apples and pears, it lives on hawthorn. By the way, if ever you want mistletoe in your garden, don't bother to try and plant the seeds. It rarely works. It does sometimes, but it very rarely works. Two things. Firstly, mistletoe berries, although it's all the same species, they're epigenetically modified, and mistletoe berries will only germinate on the same species as the tree they came from. So if you gather them from a poplar or from a hawthorn and you thought, well, I know that it goes on apples and pears, so we'll try it in our garden, it won't work. You need to get seeds from a plant that grew on an apple, and then you stand a rough chance they might germinate on your apple. But if you go online and do a search, you will find that there are quite a number of organisations which will provide you with a young tree on which mistletoe is already grown. They're not terribly expensive, I don't know, 20 quid or so. So if you want to get yourself mistletoe, it's best to buy a ready seeded tree. Mistletoe was known to the ancient Greeks. Berries of mistletoe were infused, and it was taken just pretty much as a cure. The Druids used it to cure epilepsy, because in large amounts of seeds can cause it. But in the modern era, we have been looking at extracts, biochemical extracts in seeds of mistletoe, and it has been shown to have anti-cancer properties, and also it can stimulate the immune system. So its medicinal purposes are here. And what about holly? Ilex acrophilium. Well, there are more than 150 species of holly. Holly is brought indoors because it is a summer-looking evergreen plant. Very prickly. It's dioecious. If you've got a male one, it's never going to produce berries. It is a dioecious plant, so make sure you have a female holly if it's berries. And it does contain theobromine and caffeine, a stimulant. I don't recommend that you make tea out of it. It has been done in the past. It also contains a lot of alkaloids, which are very poisonous. Now, holly, of course, is very prickly. And people often say, well, I'd like to grow holly, but I don't want it to be prickly for the kids. But you can also get holly that is not prickly at all. The normal holly leaves look like this, covered with little prickles. And that is, of course, the holly plant's way of resisting predation. But as the tree grows, it kind of knows that it's wasting its time making prickles because nothing can reach that high. So high up on a holly, you get prickleless leaves. And if you take a cutting from the top of a sort of 30-foot tall holly tree and plant it then grows without any prickles at all. So that's something you might like to try. I haven't seen it advertised, but it would be worth experimenting with. What about ivy? Ivy, of course, is another of these plants which has been which is celebrated all the time because of the fact that it maintains its colour. This is a Spanish ivy, but Hedera helix is the ivy plant. It was the mark of Bacchus and was used as a sign of the Antichrist. And I find it quite interesting that even today, when you go and buy a garland for your house or you go and get decorations, they have plastic wreaths. They have fir trees in them. They have models of holly in them, but you don't see them with ivy. And it's almost as though the knowledge that ivy was the symbol in some religions of the Antichrist has come down to us in our modern era, and we still put holly and we still put mistletoe, but we don't much put ivy. The other plant, which is associated very much with Christmas, is this one, Poinsettia. Now, this is a euphorbia. Euphorbias are a remarkable genus. They include a lot of flesh-eating garden plants right through to some cacti. It's known as the Christmas plant. And people often think, well, perhaps I'll grow it myself. Well, it doesn't really work. When you see them growing, you will see this species of euphorbia growing in the Canary Islands. It's quite a tall, straggly plant with a leaf coming out every 6 inches, every 15 centimetres or so. The reason that they also bunch together is because they're chemically treated with a hormone that stops the stems from elongating. And so that's why it is. Instead of having one here and one here, and one, they're all bunched together. So if you were to plant it from a seed and grow it yourself, it would work. It's all big and straggly. They're not petals, by the way. The flowers of this euphorbia, and it's true of most of the euphorbias, are those tiny little yellowy green specks in the middle. They're bracts, they're coloured leaves. Well, so much for the plants at Christmas. What about singing at Christmas time? Carols are the hallmark of Christmas. We had some, by the way, wasn't it brilliant yesterday, those of you who heard the Bournemouth singers in the Grand Lobby singing without a microphone. So often you will see operatic singers in a fairly small room singing with a microphone. So of course the sound engineer is turning it down and they're holding back, and one wants to go and tap them on the shoulder and say, why don't you put the money in down and just sing? It was so nice to see people singing full-blooded carols yesterday, and I hope you all enjoyed that too. Well, the earliest singing of carols recorded in the literature is back in the middle 700s. That's when people started singing them. We had festive carols, specifically at Christmas, from about the year 1100 onwards. And then, of course, from the 1300s and 1400s, people began to specifically write religious carols and words that specifically applied to the birth of Jesus at Christmas time. Now, I find it rather sad. Youngsters these days are missing out on all the things that we all knew. We knew all the classic nursery rhymes that had been told for centuries. We used to hear all the carols. And when you hear a carol now, it takes your heart back to childhood Christmas celebrations. And yet, of course, kids don't hear them like that anymore. It's Noddy Holder that kids will think of as being something to do with Christmas. And in many ways, some of the traditional songs and the rhymes and the poems, the nursery rhymes and the stories that we knew as kids are not being told to kids anymore these days. And modern teenagers are growing up without it. So they will not have that connection with the past that we all have. By the way, Poinsettia was named after a man called Poinsett, who was the first ambassador to Mexico sent from the United States. He was also an amateur botanist. So, What about the Star of Bethlehem? Well, yes, there's some science in that too. It has often been thought that it might possibly have been a supernova, because the Chinese astronomers used to write when it was a supernova, and indeed a star appeared in the east. That could have been a supernova. But that doesn't really work, because of course the scriptures say how the star seemed to lead them on, and then how the star seemed to come to rest over Bethlehem. And it's compounded by the fact that in the ancient times, people used the word star for any old thing. It could have been a planet, it could have been a comet, it could have been normal stars, of course, shooting stars and supernovae. But what is one of the most likely possibilities, because these early astronomers were very accurate observers, was the conjunction of planets coming together. This is when the planets appear, as in this photograph, appear very close to each other in the sky. And there were a number of conjunctions at about the relevant time. Now, Jupiter goes around the Sun just under every 12 years, and Saturn just under every 30 years, and so they pass in the sky about every 20 years, coming close together. Mars and Jupiter and Saturn were in conjunction in 6 BC, and Jupiter and Venus were in conjunction in the year 2 BC. And when the planets move through the sky, because of the fact that we're orbiting the Sun as well, they do appear to move across, and then sometimes to stop, and even to move backwards. And for a few weeks, they will seem to hover in the sky. So that certainly would have worked. And Jupiter and Saturn were quite close together on the 27th of May in the year 1 BC, and the 6th of October in the same year. Could also have been an eclipse. An eclipse of the moon has been put forward as being one possible explanation, and that certainly works, ladies and gentlemen. And there were relevant eclipses. Herod, for example, is supposed to have died shortly after a lunar eclipse, and there was one in the year 4 BC and another one in the year 1 BC, according to our current reckoning. It has been suggested it might have been a comet, and there were comets. There was a comet, a tailed comet, in the year 5 BC. Then we had another comet in 4 BC, and Halley's comet, bless it, came by in 2 BC. Of course, it's difficult to get records, but some of the ancient Phoenicians did leave carvings that we can identify in clay tablets indicating astronomical phenomena. And most enduring of all are coins. And these are coins from ancient Syria. And you see that there is a star shown atop there, and also a ram. And this is the suggestion of an astronomical event which was being commemorated by the astrologers at the time. Well, Santa Claus has become a great symbol of Western Christmas, and indeed he existed. He was St. Nicholas, patron saint of giving. He was in Palestine and in Egypt, and he attended the first council of Nicaea in the year 325. So we know that he was a real, genuine person. There's no difficulty about that. And what about the notion of the Nativity? Well, here is a typical, the Adoration of the Magi, typical painting from the 1400s. And Ghirlandaio, who painted it, actually had Michelangelo as one of his apprentices. So this was a highly influential Italian painter. And it's true that the birth of Jesus has been portrayed by a great many painters. Charles Le Brun painted this one. And some of the lyrical, the transcendently ethereal sense of wonder and awe and calm is very visible in these things. This man painted this picture in 1689. He was the court painter to Louis IV of France. It is interesting, isn't it? This scene has given rise to so many of the most beautiful paintings of all. And yet, when you think of Christmas and Santa, you have to think immediately of this image taken by CocaCola. Now, CocaCola is slightly naughty. I know it'll surprise you to think that any major company could ever be slightly naughty, but if you go around the CocaCola Centre in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States, you see a whole lot about the origins of Coca-Cola. No mention of the fact that it was originally produced for drug addicts, because of course the cola is the flavour from the cola palm, and the coca refers to the cocaine that it contained. And so people used to go into Coke bars in Victorian America and buy infusions of Coke and have a sweet, just as we might have an espresso. Coffee in much the same way as we in this country used to take laudanum. I mean, I last bought medicine containing opium in 1965 in this country. Dr. John Collis Brown's mixture, which contained opium. And indeed, I led the campaign to have it banned, because it was possible at that time to buy as much opium as you wanted, legally over the counter. If you go to see the headquarters of Coca-Cola, they make no mention whatever of cocaine. They just tell you that it was terribly refreshing and a quite lovely drink, more or less the same then as it was now, except for one vital ingredient that is no longer present. Now, it was an artist called Haddon Sundblom who painted this picture, and Coca-Cola have always tried to pretend that because their colour was what you might call pillowbox red, or Santa's jacket red if you prefer, that they invented Santa. Oh no, they didn't. This picture dates from the 1930s, but if you'd like to crank back the time a little bit, long before then, you can go back to 1896, and here is Santa in red, done by Louis Prang, another artist. If you'd like to go back even further than that, ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to Harper's Weekly, and here in 1863 is Santa wearing red. So quite why Coca-Cola have got this wonderful association. We invented Santa, and the red Santa's jacket is simply the red Coca-Cola logo. Very, very naughty. I notice Pepsi have fallen for it. Pepsi-Cola have just said, why not start a new tradition of Christmas? Now, humble, ordinary, ignorant people like you and me thought that Christmas centred on things like chickens and turkeys and crackers. No, no, no. Coca-Cola is what it centres on. So they're saying, let's start a new tradition of drinking Pepsi-Cola instead. But you needn't worry, it's a complete myth. Coke had nothing to do with it. Here we go back to J.W. Parkinson and Kris Kringle in 1841. And the furthest I've managed to go back is, in fact, to Clement Clark Moore,